If you've ever had one of those moments when light flashes before your eyes, it's hopefully not something that happens too often, but we can almost guarantee it'll leave you with a fresh perspective on the world afterwards. We put together a list of 10 people who've had one of these experiences after getting slightly too close with some of the largest animals on this planet. Maybe Ellie the elephant looked cute from far away, but for most of these people, they'll probably think twice about getting too close to the big five again. If you're looking for a slightly less intense way to get that epiphany without risking your life with these huge creatures, make sure you click the subscribe button instead. Plenty of cool videos that will give you the same thrill, but without the risk of getting snapped up. The blue whale. The blue whale can be heard singing from more than 600 miles away, and combined with their huge size, it would be hard to stumble across one. In fact, scientists at the moment are trying to do the opposite and get as close as possible in order to learn more about the whale. However, due to their endangered status, it's hard to get close without disturbing the whale, which can lead to bad consequences. With this in mind, it's incredible if you do get to experience a close encounter with a blue whale. And that's exactly what kayaker Rick Coleman got to do when out at sea in Southern California. Rick was lucky because he got all of the good elements of spotting a blue whale without the bad parts. The whale's huge size means one spontaneous movement could end up fatal for nearby humans or smaller animals. He was aware of this and kept calm while managing to film the encounter as the whale swam nearby. Blue whales are considered pretty unpredictable and potentially dangerous, so they're not something you'd necessarily jump at the chance to get close to. The trick is to not interrupt their movements, and Rick's knowledge of this was probably what kept him alive at the time. Now, he can look back on this as an incredible experience that he'll probably never get to recreate. The giant squid. It's not one you often come across, but the giant squid has been known to cause some damage in its time. Recently, a Greenpeace submarine was attacked by a giant squid in the Bering Sea, which falls between Russia and Alaska. It's not clear what prompted the attack, but out of nowhere the squid appeared and launched itself at the vessel. Greenpeace had previously had some training for how to deal with the problems underwater, but nothing could have prepared them for the giant squid's attack. It drew its full force at the boat before whipping its tentacles towards it. In reaction, the submarine flashed a bright light in the direction of the squid to try to confuse it. Unfortunately, this had the opposite effect. The squid became very angry and started attacking the vessel twice as viciously. Squids have the potential to produce suction forces around 100 pounds per square inch, so it was a huge stroke of luck that somehow the submarine survived the attack. When it realized that the submarine wasn't going anywhere, the giant squid fired a huge burst of ink towards it, then shortly after swam away. The vessel was undamaged and Greenpeace continued their journey unharmed. The brown bear. It might look big and fluffy, but the brown bear is definitely one to avoid getting too close to. With giant claws, it can finish you off faster than you can shout, "Help!" Despite this, it's pretty common to go on the lookout for brown bears, which is just what happened to a man called Jeff and his 2 daughters in Canada last year. They'd gone out on a scouting trip to northern British Columbia to prep for a future hunting trip when they spotted the bear and her cubs. It was at this point when the bear spotted the family too. Jeff was no stranger to bears and had many previous encounters with them before, just not as close as this. In true scout form, he knew he could shoot the bear if it came too close, but this was not something he would do unless he absolutely had to. The bear walked towards the 3 of them and started circling them. She popped her jaws as the family kept very still, hoping for the best. As the bear had cubs nearby, Jeff was certain that was the reason she was so defensive. After realizing the scouts weren't a threat, the bear slinked off with their cubs, leaving Jeff and his children to enjoy the rest of their trip in peace. The humpback whale. What's the answer if you want to meet the creatures of the ocean without having to dive deep down? Stay in a boat. It's a common solution for those who want to see dolphins, but a pair from Alaska were fortunate enough to meet a humpback whale this way, although they might not have felt so fortunate at the time. Jack Delaney and Kat Georgia were kayaking at Cape Resurrection in Alaska when they experienced what could have been their last few moments. They spotted a pod of humpback whales before realizing just how close the sea creatures were getting. Growing excited, they filmed the amazing animals swimming around while thinking how incredible the experience was. Suddenly, their kayak rocked and the pair screamed. They noticed bubbles rising to the surface of the water as the whales grew closer to them and wondered if maybe they'd got too close after all. It was clear the whales didn't mean any harm, but their great mass meant there was a lot of potential to knock over the kayak and throw Jack and Kate into the ocean. They held on tight and watched as the whales swam on and left them alone again. Afterwards, They called it a once-in-a-lifetime moment, but only once they were safely back on ground. The rhino. It's one of the animals we'd all like to see up close, but it's also one of the most dangerous. You can usually see rhinos on safaris, but it's a risk. It's an endangered animal, so guards aren't allowed to shoot them if something goes wrong. This is all well and good, unless one decides to take a fancy to you and gets a little bit too close. This is nearly what happened to two young travelers who took a trip to Zimbabwe. The girls were enjoying their vacation at Zimbabwe's oldest national park, called Rhodes Metopus, when they saw the rhino nearby. The park has a huge variety of animals, so it was no surprise to see the rhino in such close proximity. However, they didn't count on it coming just as close as it did. Their guide was standing in front of the pair when the rhino decided to take a few steps towards them. All three froze, while the animal took deep sniffs and looked like he could choose to attack. Not knowing what else to do, the girls had to just wait until the rhino lost interest and kept walking. At worst case scenario, the guard did have the equipment to protect the safari group, but it's very frowned upon. Luckily, this time it wasn't necessary. The hammerhead shark. Most people go on vacation to relax, take a break, and to catch up on a good book or two. Not Steve D. Hailing from New Jersey, Steve instead prefers to spend his time off work swimming with sharks. Not quite as relaxing, we don't think. He's definitely someone who has had more than a handful of close encounters with huge animals. But Steve doesn't even seem to be scared of any of them. Most recently, he went swimming with the hammerhead shark and called it a cute water puppy. In contrast to our other near misses, Steve likes to optimally get as close as possible to the huge sea creatures and hopes to encourage others to view them in a more positive light too. While he's deep underwater, Steve captures photos of sharks doing anything from swimming to catching prey and doesn't seem at all bothered by their giant teeth. He swam with the hammerhead sharks in Bimini whilst covering a variety of dives in the Bahamas. To fully show how cute the sharks supposedly can be, he even took photos stroking the beast and has never once been attacked. As sweet as it sounds, we'll probably stick to swimming with dolphins for the time being. The elephant. African elephants can weigh up to 6.6 tons, so although they might look pretty cute, they can still inflict an awful lot of damage. This was the case for two Swiss tourists who had gone on a safari in South Africa. Rico Beltrame and his sister Angela thought they were just going to have a nice day admiring the animals, but how wrong they were. As they toured the safari in their hired car, an African elephant sauntered towards them and put his foot on the hood of the car. Normally, if an animal approaches you in a safari, you're supposed to stop the car or at least drive very slowly. This way you won't scare them and they won't attack you. The Beltrames were instructed to stop and thought the animal would keep walking. Instead, the huge beast took a closer look at the pair and waited for about 6 or 7 minutes before continuing his journey. At the time, the brother and sister were obviously terrified, but considered it an amazing experience afterwards. Well, aside from paying to repair the hired car, which cost nearly $600, the pair were lucky because if the elephant had decided to attack, he could have easily crushed the entire vehicle in one smooth swoop. The alligator. A lot of people confuse alligators and crocodiles, and when one comes swimming towards you, your best bet is to probably get away instead of figuring out which is which. Fortunately, these attacks are pretty rare nowadays, and we know what to look for if alligators are swimming nearby. However, this isn't to say that attacks never happen. Recently, a 10-year-old girl from Florida was attacked by an alligator and only managed to break free by forcing open its jaws. The young girl had been swimming in Lake Mary Jane in Orange County, Florida, when the beast swam up towards her. It managed to bite her 7 times before she could get away, but she survived. It thought that she somehow pried open the gator's mouth while it was chopping away on her legs. While she was doing her best to get free, she screamed and a nearby lifeguard ran over to help. There were about a dozen people at the lake at the time, and she was dragged back to shore. The girl was rushed to a hospital and suffered several puncture wounds to the back of her knee and an injury to the front, but otherwise was fine. The polar bear. Sightings of the polar bear have become part of everyday life for people living in the Arctic Circle. But for those who aren't quite so accustomed to seeing the huge animals, it can still be a shock when in close proximity to them. This was the case for a woman identified only as Ludmila, who was attacked by a polar bear in a village called Yangranai Chan in northern Russia. After spying the bear lurking around the corner, she decided to try and make friends with it. She had just given a chicken bone to the polar bear and was walking towards it to apparently feed it again. Unfortunately, it seems this wasn't the most grateful of polar bears, as it decided to attack her instead of graciously accepting the food. At one point, the bear even threw her into the air. Ludmila was lucky to survive and only managed to get away when an onlooker heard her screams and saw what was going on. He threw an object at the bear in an attempt to give Ludmila some time to run away. Luckily, it worked. With this brief distraction, the polar bear let go of the young woman and she scrambled away to safety. The great white shark. Diver Ash Gibb was only a few feet from shore in Australia when he nearly spent his last moments with a great white shark. This wasn't entirely surprising because Ash, who creates documentaries for a living, was fully intending to see the great white, but he didn't expect it to get quite so close. He was swimming in Western Australia in the Lucky Bay. The area is known for great white sharks, and Ash had been hoping to get near enough to one to capture it on film. Unfortunately, the shark got a lot closer than anticipated and circled Ash for 2 whole minutes. He hadn't even realized until the shark poked him in the back and caused his camera to jolt. Without any protection from the huge creature, Ash focused on keeping his camera still, despite wondering if this would be the end of him. Luckily, the shark soon gave up and swam away, before devouring a nearby fish. Unlike the rest of us, Ash wasn't too worried about being eaten alive, because great white sharks aren't known for spontaneously attacking humans out of fear. However, the animal does bite some people out of curiosity. We don't imagine they get up close and personal with many humans, and this bite can be fatal. If you take one thing from this video, it should be that animals are just as curious about saying hi to us as we are to them. It just seems that sometimes they go about it a little too ambitiously. On the plus side though, all of the people featured in this video got a lucky escape, which isn't always the case, especially for deep-sea divers. We hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure to subscribe for more interesting facts on your favorite creatures. Thanks!